Right, shall we have a go at question 2, which is the one about what are the best ways to help lower maths anxiety without lowering expectations? Maybe we'll talk about how to deal with maths anxiety and then come back to whether we're lowering expectations or not towards the end.
Can I connect that question with your lovely 2-zone diagram?
Go on then.
So we've met primary school teachers whose youngsters get anxious, and so what the teacher does is become very protective of that child because they don't want to see them upset, crying, sort of avoiding, and so they don't give them
behavior.
Indeed. Yeah. So then they don't give them challenging questions.
I've picked up classes like that. It's a nightmare because I want the children to engage and they've got into this comfort zone and they want their maths to be like that, and it all goes bananas.
So we found that introducing the 3-zone diagram and the language that I'm thinking of introducing with you now, that we can overcome that protective behaviour and definitely have high expectations. But you achieve the high expectations by keeping youngsters in the growth space, only occasionally stepping into anxiety to know that you're right at the edge of your growth space, and progressing as much as possible. Whereas if you spend lessons in the comfort zone, then your youngsters aren't progressing as much as they could. So I would say that a useful metaphor for maths anxiety is it's like learning mathematics with the emotional handbrake on. It's slowing progress, and that all these youngsters are capable of achieving much more maths. So the work that we do with mathematical resilience is definitely about increasing attainment. What's quite shocking is that youngsters go to FE having failed GCSE with, say, in the old money, a grade D. They spend a year of doing maths in their anxiety zone, a lot of them, and they get a 20% pass rate. And that's not about high expectations, that's about not understanding the impact of anxiety. So I absolutely agree with the person who's raised the question that we want to increase expectations, but make sure that we take that emotional handbrake off. And the way I suggest that we do it, which is based in research with a lot of teachers and a lot of parents and a lot of support workers, is to introduce these 2 tools, the hand model of the brain and the growth zone model, and also something based in Benson's work about the relaxation response, which is about knowing how you get out of the red space when you find yourself in it. And if you use those 3 tools, you can develop a language of awareness of when a youngster's out of their depth. If you're teaching swimming, you can see if a kid's panicking out of their depth, but in maths you can't see it. It's all hidden. And so I think we need to make this explicit. And if you have this language of awareness, you can then develop safeguarding, psychological safeguarding, and make sure that as many kids as possible are in their growth zone, and that they understand that if they're feeling stupid, they've gone into their red zone and that they need to calm down and get out of it so that they can start proceeding again. So I want to say that we're very much promoting high standards.
Can I just challenge that? Because I think the conscious awareness of these zones, when I'm working with children, I think it typically works from about age 11 up. So it works with secondary school, FE, higher education children. But I've been working a lot with primary. And at primary, I think it's much, much more about the teacher knowing all this stuff and being able to understand and work around the kids.
Well, maybe, but yeah, it's a 2-pronged thing here, that there are some teachers who aren't there yet. There are a lot of primary teachers who point and ask questions. I have worked with primary school children, and they need to know, I believe. It's like any kind of what's the word when you danger awareness, stranger danger, and that sort of thing that you tell children. If a child is experiencing that red zone, they need to understand that they're not feeling safe and that they're entitled to feel safe. So I had one young lady I worked with who was 9 or 10, and she was beginning to stammer in the maths lessons. And so what we did was we talked about her having a choice, that if the teacher asked her a question, she could either choose to answer and stammer, or she could choose to be defiant and not answer. And she decided to choose to be defiant and not answer, and the stammering went away. And eventually the teacher stopped asking her unless her hand was up. And then she became the leader of this slightly slower but very talented group of students, very creative students who just needed a bit more confidence and time, very, very sensitive perhaps. and her maths progressed until the teacher started doing that again. And the second time, months later, she ran to the toilet to get away from that threat, because the children are entitled to feel safe, safe enough. Obviously, there's this brave growth challenge space, but they shouldn't be in their anxiety space the whole time. So I think this works with primary school children as well as secondary and HE and FE and parents. And there's an example on the internet we can provide a link to of a child using it with her mother, and maths suddenly stops being a problem at home.
That reminds me, on the front of my Rebecca the Maths Lady website is a picture of me running some training. And that was a classic bit of training. That was with teaching assistants. And at the very beginning of the day, I gave them stickers to choose from. One was a red sticker, which was, please never ask me a question unless I've got my hand up.
Mm-hmm.
Another was a green sticker, which was, I'm up for anything, you can ask me anytime. And there was also a sparkly sticker, which was just be kind to me and be a bit cautious, but I'm okay to try generally, but I'm quite scared. And they found wearing those stickers really helpful, because a lot of those teaching assistants had maths anxiety themselves and real confidence issues.
Absolutely, it's prevalent with support staff, and everywhere in the FE colleges or at university, we've got staff with maths anxiety, and they form our parent body. And we have a lot of parents with maths anxiety, and it can be learned.
So if I just talk a little bit about the strategies I'm using with primary school children I'm working with just now, I'm working with upper key stage 2, so age 9 to 11, on interventions and so on. I'm doing two things. One is I'm making sure I puzzle out what it is they don't understand in ways that has never happened for them before. And that involves going right back. I'll do a live stream this Sunday. It'll be the third in my series on these interventions, where I'll talk very specifically. You know, I've got children where I'm working on multiplication. They can't do addition and understand exchanging. They might have learned to do exchanging, but they don't understand what's going on, and I need to fix that. And then I've got children who are even lower level than that, and I'll explain how I diagnose that and intervene. And I think to really fix maths anxiety, children need to be around teachers who can take those steps back and forward again and really fix their maths.
Yeah, we've got another metaphor for that, which is the ladder of accessibility. And you're right that sometimes there are rungs missing in the child's understanding, because they've been in the red zone while they've had that content at school and they haven't learned it. And so the fourth tool we'd give a learner is a rung, just to say, I think I need some more rungs because I can't see how to progress. I've got a lovely image that we can share with listeners of these two ladders, one with enough rungs and the one where the person's not even getting started. And yeah, when you're missing a rung and something doesn't make sense, the teacher is the person who can help you identify, but the teachers don't always recognise that they're making assumptions that are causing gaps in the ladder. So we have to work with both the learner and the teacher sometimes. So
I'm constantly thinking about the rungs. But the other thing that I find is, and I was the lead author on the original NCETM microsite for teaching assistants in maths classrooms on how to work with children. And I talked a lot about how when children are in this anxious state, you need a lot of strings to your bow in working with these children, because you're going to try some strategies and they're going to fail. And that's kind of part of the human dynamic between a child who's very anxious and someone who's working with them. So I was looking at things like, using apparatus, going back to the rungs in the ladder, using humour, getting the children to teach each other, all sorts of little strategies that teachers can use, and understand that there isn't a single right strategy. It's just part of the journey. Can I hold you up there a second?
It's really important that we don't muddle up the red zone and the orange zone.
Okay.
So the strategies you're talking about, which are really, really important, I would describe as building the orange zone, where the learner can hear you. There is no point in trying to use these different strategies and talk to the learner when they're feeling there's a tiger in the room. We've got to get them back to the growth zone and the confidence in you that you're going to hold them. Go back to the swimming metaphor again, that if they know they're either back in their depth or somebody's there to support them, then they can make progress with their swimming. And so the strategies you're talking about would be wasted if we don't also teach the youngsters how to get, or even the adults, how to get out of that anxiety space so that they can hear those lovely strategies. So one of the important messages to teachers is you don't keep talking to a learner who's in panic because they can't hear you. Their brain is trying to save their life. So we're wasting our time. What you want is to get back into the exciting space, which is where you're nervous and you're excited because you're learning something new, but you feel that you've got enough support that you can thrive in that space. Does that make sense of what you're saying?
And that brings to mind that another element of moving children between the zones is time. It's not just rational. Sometimes when you're working with a child, they need 10 minutes out for their hormones to resolve. And
absolutely.
And I send them to sit on the sofa. This child that I was describing this week, who came in and was like, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. There's no point in me being here, I can't do it. And I was saying, you know, all I'm asking you to do is stand up and go to the window. I can't do it. Well, I'll do that, but I can't do it.
Because she's not hearing you to start with, and then somehow her brain clocks that what she's being asked to do isn't threatening.
And eventually I just have to sit down with this child and say, look, if you're going to behave like this, I'm going to have to send you back to class because I need to work with the other children too. And at the minute, I can't do anything because of the way you're behaving. And ultimately, I had to send that child back to class. The teacher had a word, sent them back. They came back to me just as bad. I sent them back to class again. The teacher sent them back to me again. By that time, they'd calmed down and we just got on with it after that.
So what's happening there in terms of the Benson thinking about getting out of the anxiety zone is the brain's gone offline. She can't hear well, and her brain needs to know that she's not under threat. And so there are ways of triggering that recovery. One of the ways is with 5-7 type breathing, shorter in breath, longer out breath. And one is about paying attention to the environment. They're what I call micro mindfulness that you can use with the youngsters. But another way is actually getting away from the threat. So because the child has moved away from the classroom and then come back, the brain has thought, they're dealing with the threat. And so the brain's had time to come back to sort of, okay, I can try this mode. Yeah. And another way to do it is to have something to eat if they're on their own at home, to go away and come back, to do some exercise, to run. But we actually spend a very short time teaching all people how to get out from the red zone into the orange zone or the yellow zone that you've drawn there, because we need those strategies. And lots of people in research have found that mindfulness works. Maths teachers can't all use mindfulness, but we can use micro mindfulness, and we can actually send the child out of the class and get them to come back. But if they understand they're in the red zone and they learn these strategies, then they're more willing to have a go, because they say, oh, it's all right, I'm in my red zone, come back in 5 minutes. Do you see what I mean? Or leave me alone. And we have teachers with that diagram on the table and the penny showing where the child feels they are. If they're in the anxiety zone, you might say to the child, okay, have you tried your 5-7 breathing? What can you hear? But not try and talk about the maths. Whereas if the child's showing they're in their orange zone, then the TA can get involved with what can you tell me? What's the problem? Can you underline the words that you haven't understood? You can use those kind of strategies to put the rungs back in place and get some progress. But as you've beautifully described, that girl wasn't in. Sorry, I don't know if it was a girl or a boy. wasn't in hearing mode because they were so far into the red zone. And if we understand that as the primitive brain trying to save their life, they're not going to be doing much math with you. And as you say, they're going to be wasting a lot of time. And we haven't got that time to waste. We haven't got an awful lot of maths teachers. We haven't got a lot of spare capacity. They've got a year to reset their GCSEs. There's no point in them leaving them in that red space for that whole year where they don't make the progress they're capable of. It's a waste of resources.
And there's a couple of other threads of that I want to pull out just before we finish this section.
Mm-hmm.
One is that what the dynamic around that child only worked because I had really good relationships with all the other teachers around about me. That child could easily have played me off against other teachers,
Absolutely.
and they will often try to. And if there's a dynamic where teachers don't fully trust and professionally respect each other and aren't working together in that kind of way, then it all goes wrong. And I've seen that as well. And the other thing, just to link back to the behaviour issues, often children, I find, if they've been with a teacher who's done this and just kept them in the comfort zone, and then they come to me, the behaviour goes absolutely bananas as I try and challenge them to re-engage, because they are fighting me to not have to do that. And their behaviour is awful. And you have to be the kind of teacher who's just not remotely fazed by that and can see it exactly for what it is. Now, when a child is behaving awfully for you and well for other teachers, it's really scary as a young teacher and for your professional competency and the way you come across to other people. And just to be able to ride the storm and go, I know what this is, we will get there. And I know that we have to take this journey. Sometimes the behavior just has to, like that child, his behavior had to go off the planet because I was dealing with a group of children. I wasn't just dealing with this one child, and these things happen. And we just had to work through it. But
this is, it's so sad when we interviewed a lad who was excluded from school at the age of 12 for behavior. And we gave him the tool, the 3 zones tool. And he said he spent his whole time in school in his red zone.
Yeah.
And so he didn't have strategies. The teachers were blaming his behaviour and not understanding that he was in his red zone and he needed space to calm down. And my experience with this, the other zone, the 3 zone model, is if we explain a little bit of this to the young people, and that they've got this growth space that they can grow. Like quite often youngsters will say, I don't have they recognise they haven't got a growth zone, and they go straight from comfort to panic. They understand when you share the model with them. And we want to grow that growth space where they recognise they can take risks. The anti-racist groups call it brave space, where you don't feel comfortable, but you do feel that you're able to take risks and challenge each other and that you're all going to survive. Yeah.
Yes. And of course, the ultimate place to be, where have I put that diagram? If I try this one, that's where we want the children to be, just comfortable.
With awareness of the red zone around the edge.
Comfortable being out of their comfort zone.
Absolutely, yes. and that's how we keep standards.
Being out of their comfort zone and just looking at that going, that's a bit boring. I want to be here.
But that's the place that, let me just say, the boring isn't quite the green zone. It would be the blue zone in the middle that you can't see. The comfort zone is where you might be automating things, preparing for exams, doing things you really understand, practicing, building up your neurons that are already partly laid down. So we do need to spend some time in that space, like homework, where you just get on and build these skills that you've already understood. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But you want to stay there.
Play around with your definitions. I put that as a type of growth, actually, developing automaticity if you're doing it consciously and it's what you want to do at that time.
Okay.
You could argue it.